Hello, everybody. Namaste. Welcome to Convex. This is VWO's very own in-house online summit where we are talking about all things experimentation. Of course, I don't need to introduce VWO. It's the world's leading consumer insights discovery and experimentation platform. Companies are using us to figure out what are their conversion bottlenecks and removing them through forward-looking A/B tests done through our platform. Just give it a spin and tell us how you feel about it. So I'm really excited to have on board Paras. Paras is the founder at VWO. My name is Bhavya. I lead account-based marketing here. This chat is a very freewheeling conversation between I and Paras about what makes a conversion-centric organization, a conversion-first organization, an experimentation-driven organization. Paras, through all his years of experience, is going to talk about how to distill an experimentation first culture. It's a topic which is dear to both of us, and I believe you will have a lot of enriching insights once you are out of this talk. There is this LinkedIn group that we have in which all the subscribers are hanging out, they're networking. The link is right here on your screens. Just go and check out for yourselves what is the chatter up to, what are we up to. Paras, please take it away.
Hey everyone, so today I'll talk about embedding experimentation in the company culture. And the reason I picked this topic was because throughout my experience as founder of VWO over the last, say, 10 years, I've seen that many companies rightly embrace A/B testing in terms of helping them increase their conversion rate. And after all, that's why most companies start with A/B testing, because they want their sign-up rates, conversion rates, and any other business metric to go up. But I've come to understand by learning from many of our clients that there is sort of like a larger value that can be derived through A/B testing, which is in transforming the entire company culture into becoming more experimentation focused, so that it sort of moves away from just being about optimizing marketing metrics to even everyday conversations. People and team members are talking about A/B testing various different things. So let's start. Why am I well placed to talk about this? Bhavya briefly mentioned about VWO, but my personal involvement with VWO obviously has been from day one. I've seen more than 1 million campaigns run on VWO with thousands and thousands of clients across so many industries. And even from a business sides perspective, I've personally interacted with one-person company to all the way to Fortune 500 companies. So I have had the privilege to see experiments being run in a variety of different contexts, industries, and business sizes. And in this presentation, that is what I'm going to share with you, right from the very basics for someone who's just starting out with A/B testing to people who have really mastered the art of experimentation. What does that journey look like? And how in your organization tomorrow you can go back and talk to your peers, colleagues, and even your boss and really discuss how do you move yourself from where you are today to where you want to be in terms of building an experimentation culture. And Bhavya, as I said, feel free to ask any clarifying questions you have on the behalf of other viewers of this presentation. So first, let's talk about why focus on culture at all. And culture is one such word which has been really used in a variety of contexts, in many cases, even misused as well. So, I mean, before just why focus on culture, let me at least define culture. So culture is not really having, say, fancy posters in office or going to maybe some strategic offsites and so on. Culture to me is what decisions are being taken by team members and people in the company without oversight of their, say, superiors or their bosses. So culture, frankly, in one line, is simply the decisions that are being made by a company in their everyday operations. So by experimentation culture, by just the extension of that, it's really about when people are talking in an office, they're trying to make decisions, whether they're making decisions in an arbitrary way, through a very opinion-driven way, or whether they're really embracing the spirit of A/B testing and experimentation in their everyday decisions. So these decisions can go from very small things such as what should we have for lunch to the really big decisions, strategic decisions such as should you open an international office or not. And embedding an experimentation culture in all those decisions just means that the way conversion rates improve through online A/B testing, various different business metrics will also start getting improved by focusing on that culture. So experimentation culture really means, you have to sort of invest. Sorry, I meant the reason in this focus on culture is important. I mean, let's track back a little bit. Imagine you're very enthusiastic about A/B testing. You purchase a very expensive subscription of a product or a service, or maybe you contact an agency to help you with conversion optimization. And initially, in all the enthusiasm, you make a lot of time and monetary investment. And I have seen with a lot of clients that just that is not enough. A tool can tell you that A is better than B or B is better than A, and similarly, an agency can tell you that. But if internally the stakeholders in your company are not prepared to accept that they could be wrong, then no amount of investment is going to help you reap the benefits of experimentation, because people will reject if their mindset is not prepared from an experimentation point of view, they will reject the results that are not aligned with what they have been believing earlier. And I've seen it multiple times. The highest paid person's opinion also prevails after an experiment is done, because they haven't fully bought into the culture of experimentation. And like I said, without this culture shift in your organization, after initial enthusiasm, things will just go back to opinion driven changes, where people will just do whatever they want to do, even after they have data or even after they have A/B test result. So that's why building a culture by laying the right groundwork in your team is very, very important. It takes time and effort, but without it, uh, only initial enthusiasm will not cut it. You'll be back to square one. And just to give you a flavor of what the epitome of this experimentation culture looks like, uh, there are some companies that have absolutely nailed it. And this is the level I'm talking about. So, for example, at Amazon, any developer can launch an A/B test anywhere on the store without permission. Just think about it for a minute and contrast it with how things might be happening in your organization. Does your organization have a separate testing team? Maybe you don't even have a separate testing team, and the marketing team itself does A/B tests. But can someone, say, an engineering team or sales team or even an HR team, can they suggest an A/B test? Or can a developer really, when they have a good idea, do they have to go to the product team to get their feedback and then really start developing that feature? So there's so much of complexity in usually organization to even get an idea across, that the best of the experimentation cultures like Amazon, they allow any developer to just launch an A/B test, because they understand that an opinion is just an opinion and real data can only be had through A/B tests. And similarly on booking.com, anyone in the organization, including the CEO and including, say, someone in administration department who may have nothing to do with the testing pipeline, they still have an ability to feed their testing ideas into the testing pipeline. How amazing is that? And this really shows how right from the top, the entire organization understands that these great experimentation ideas can come from everywhere. And on Facebook, thousands of experiments are running every day. So the version you see Facebook is very likely different from the version I see. And this means that across entire Facebook at any moment of time, there's so many tests running that it has to be decentralized. They won't be anyone who's keeping track of thousands of experimentations. And to come to this stage, Facebook must have had invested so much in the underlying infrastructure and also the mindset. And last example, and perhaps this is most popular one, team at Google is so obsessive about A/B testing that at one point of time they tested 11,000 shades of blue to see which shade of blue gives them maximum click-through rates in organic search results. Now that's the level that they are willing to go to in order to really drive the testing culture in their organization.
Paras, so my first question comes here. Clearly, what you have mentioned on this slide is aspirational for a lot of companies. They aspire to reach here. They've read all these stories about the names that you have written, Booking, Amazon. I personally wrote a blog about how Booking thinks about experimentation. And I've had a lot of subsequent conversations with the customers, with a lot of our customers and agencies around how to kind of amplify that culture. And they believe that it's not that the merits of experiments are not dawned onto them. They know very, very clearly about the impact that experimentation has on overall metrics, not just acquisition, but the entire AARR framework, the R framework that is the pilot framework. The question here is, and the revelation, sorry, not the question. The revelation here is that it's more of a change management problem. All right, it's not a problem of understanding how important it is. It's about how to bring everybody up to speed with what the new culture is all about, and how to get everybody tuned in and zoned into the benefits of having sustained experimentation with high velocity. How do you think companies should do that, and what are some successful examples that you have seen of our customers, maybe for example, that have deployed this very, very well in their organization?
Sure. So great question, Bhavya. And with these logos, what I didn't mean to convey was that, say, next month, next quarter, or even next year, uh, an organization can really aim to be someone like Booking.com or Google or Facebook, at least when it comes to experimentation culture. I think where these organizations are today is a result of years of continuous investment into that mindset. So it's really important to understand that what we are looking at is the cutting edge of how what experimentation cultures look like, and to get to this stage would require significant amount of time and effort. So rather than just wishing for this, and the entire presentation, my rest of the presentation is frankly about that. It's about identifying where your current experimentation efforts stand, and then really mapping out some sort of a roadmap to get to the level where these cutting edge companies are. So it cannot be done in one day, one quarter, or 1 year. It has to be, if the importance is understood by customers, then a very specific roadmap has to be planned so that one after another different roadblocks are removed and the culture moves towards such cutting edge cultures. And I'll get to that. I mean, the whole presentation is about how do you map that roadmap. Okay. So with that, in fact, the next slide is about that roadmap. I've, in my experience, I've seen the customers that I've interacted with. I mean, obviously, it is a continuum, but in the interest of clarity, I could very well categorize these into 4 stages of experimentation culture: stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and stage 4. Stage 1 is really about companies with no experience or history of testing at all. So these are the companies who've heard about testing, experimentation somewhere, and they're very enthusiastic about trying to do testing for the first time. Stage 2 is about once you have purchased a subscription of a product like VW, or went with a free product, or just you're just entering into doing your first initial A/B test. Usually, I see that people do like simple low hanging fruits, and they do occasionally A/B testing, because usually the discovery of importance of A/B testing is done by a department like marketing department, and with addition to their day-to-day responsibilities, they start A/B testing some of the things in addition to whatever they're doing. After stage 2 and stage 3, companies realize that even though occasional A/B testing is better than no testing at all, they have to they cannot rely on someone thinking that let's do a test today, or someone coming across an improvement opportunity in a very random fashion. So stage three is really about converting that occasional A/B testing and doing more investments into people and processes, so that conversion optimization runs as a program in the company, which means that just like their targets in sales, their recruitment plans, there is financial plans, and so on. Conversion optimization itself becomes plan driven, where for next quarter or next 6 months, you map out what are the tests that you're going to do, what resources are required for it, and how frequently you're able to run that. Uh, and once you do that, the stage four is the stage that we were talking about in previous slide, where companies like Booking.com or Google or Amazon come, where in addition to process driven, this really becomes a continuous experimentation across all business functions. So it is really the cutting edge where anyone can run any test, and that's a culture that they've evolved from stage one, two, and three. And this is not just limited to a website or even marketing. This seeps into many other business functions. So let's go through these stages, and what is required at each stage will become clear. And my request to you as a viewer of this presentation is to first take a moment to see where does your organization map today. Are you at stage one, stage two, stage three, or stage four? And then focus on those parts of the presentation where if you're in stage two, be very clear that you at least do things at stage one really well, and understand that what you require to be at stage three and stage four. Yeah. So the first stage, like I said, it's a stage where a company is doing no testing at all, and the goal for this stage is to obviously start doing testing. And and this is in my experience very important, that at this stage where a company is not doing testing at all, even though you as a marketer or a conversion enthusiast might be very very excited about A/B testing, I think the first thing to acknowledge is that not everyone in the organization may share your enthusiasm about A/B testing. Developers may have their reservations that you are perhaps increasing their work, or your boss may have a reservation that A/B testing is just going to waste time. And obviously, the finance team may have reservations that you're spending more, and so on. So, even though no matter how much convincing you do, nothing would convince other people more than demonstrating early wins. And by early wins, I mean really focusing on low hanging fruits, wherein it becomes not even debatable that you made a change and that had a positive impact on signups or so on. So I'll highly recommend that if you've not been doing testing, rather than going ahead and doing first really complicated test, you focus on early wins. It is true that with early wins, small changes, you will not move the needle significantly. It's not like you'll be able to change even revenue or bottom line of your organization just by a button change. But you should know that the objective is not to move the needle initially. The objective is to make people understand and more open to the idea of A/B testing. So focus on demonstrating early wins if you've not done any A/B testing at all. And I also recommend that you should make your first tests into a company-wide spectacle, um, which means that you should involve as many people as possible to sort of gather their opinions on which variation is going to win. Since A/B testing is so new in your organization, that there is no culture of debating in a data-driven manner whether X option is better or Y option is better. Perhaps consider making it like an internal betting game or something else, so that at least even the people who are not in marketing department understand that now the organization is going to collect data on at least some aspects of marketing, and people pay attention to whatever you're doing in your A/B test efforts. And once the test is complete, after the initial spectacle, maybe you publish a newsletter, maybe you launch a survey with different variations. you should definitely publish learnings for both winning and failed tests to demonstrate the value of experimentation. So again, this connects to my first point that initially your idea shouldn't be to increase the conversion rate, because that happens over a period of time. Some A/B tests work, some they don't work, and you have very little control on that. That is why you're doing A/B tests in the first place. So you should be very clear that why you're doing A/B testing in the organization. It is to open people's mindsets and to involve them into this idea. So right from making a spectacle to publishing learnings, just communicate to rest of the people in organization.
Sure. So, Paris, yes, I will. I think this is the time when I can jump in with my question. So, in stage one, the stage that we are talking about, I've also had the pleasure of speaking to a lot of customers who are stuck in stage one right now. And what they vocally, all of them have been equally vocal about this one particular finding that I've got, is that where do we begin? How do we start? All right. Since there has never been an experimentation culture, there is a strong correlation with the fact that they've also not gotten deep into data. Because if they would be playing with data, they would know what the bottlenecks are. All right. So this also aligns with the fact that, as I said, there is no wrangling with data. There are two kinds of websites at this moment: websites with low traffic, websites with high traffic. All right. Now, low traffic folks go on to methods like qualitative research. They'll go and speak to their customers so that they can have an idea velocity going for them. With high traffic customers, of course, there's been no data precedent, as we have spoken about. In such a scenario, what do you recommend? What is the mental model that you would suggest these guys to follow?
Sure, great question. And like I said, the reason people initially become stuck at what A/B test should I be doing is because I think they believe that they should be doing a good A/B test. And by good A/B test, I mean an A/B test which could potentially move the needle in their organization. But perhaps that shouldn't be the case. Perhaps the case is just start with anything that comes to your mind. I'm sure people have so many ideas that I don't contest the fact that people don't have ideas initially. I think where people get stuck initially is they don't know which idea to pick. And to my recommendation is to pick anything, because what you're trying to do initially is not to hit a home run in your first A/B test. What you're trying to do in your first A/B test is to demonstrate the value of this practice of A/B testing, which is two very different things. And once you're able to do that over a period of time, as you'll see in later stages, you'll automatically develop prioritization frameworks and different process-driven methods to uh, get and pick the right A/B test amongst like a sea of ideas that you have. So at stage one, people should not worry about picking the right idea. They should pick anything that comes to their mind and run with it. So stage two is when in stage one you've done some A/B tests to demonstrate the value of A/B tests. You made into a spectacle. You shared your learnings. Now, after that initial burst of enthusiasm, I think you are doing this occasional A/B testing where every 2 weeks or so you are maybe running a new A/B test. At this stage, if A/B test is like a second priority in your organization or in marketing teams priority list, your goal should be to transition from occasional A/B testing to a process-driven CRO. And here's how you'll do it. First, and which is the most obvious, you need to hire someone dedicated for testing. In in the case of our customers who've had tremendous success in conversion optimization, I don't know a single instance where they were able to do that without someone dedicated for testing. And by someone dedicated for testing, I mean someone who's sort of breathing and living testing daily. Just like if you have a SEO person or an email marketing person, they're living and breathing their respective function. So you need to recognize if you started doing occasional A/B testing that testing is not just like a subset of any marketing activity, a dedicated effort, which means there should be someone who's just living and breathing testing the entire day in your organization, if you're serious about this. And to hire this person, typically I've seen it this person is sort of like a product manager. So this person shouldn't be like an engineer, and the person shouldn't also be like a marketer. The person needs to have a wider context. The person may not be very deep into a specific function. The person needs to have a wider context, which typically is associated with product managers, to be able to see what changes could potentially increase conversion rate for the entire marketing funnel. And I think on our website vw.com, in the resources section, you can find the job descriptions for people whose full-time job needs to be testing.
Paras, does this the description of this persona that you just outlaid right now, he has to have a wider context. I'm presuming you're also saying he needs to be a generalist. Is that what I can imply from that statement?
Yes, more or less, because this requires a variety of skills. The person needs to have an eye for good design, because the person would need to coordinate with designers. The person would need to know prima facie how much time coding a particular variation is going to take, or whether developers need to be involved or it can be done through WYSIWYG interface. The person needs to know where do different marketing metrics start impacting, like forms and ROI of ads on Google AdWords and so on. So it requires a wide, and also say something as critical as copywriting. Person really needs to know good copywriting to write headlines and so on. So grammar and copy needs to be good. So this is like a role meant for a generalist, and over a period of time, of course, specific testing related skills become important, because you get to understand CRO and nuances of CRO a lot more. But to start off with, you definitely want someone who's a generalist. And you don't even have to hire someone externally. I've seen that people who are very enthusiastic about products, uh, they should be given a chance to sort of transition into this role at least. And this can be learned along the way. It's not like this is some secret skill which is kept away. If the only requirement is that in an 8-hour workday, the person should be dedicated to this and not necessarily bring in specialist knowledge. I don't think that's required, frankly. So once you've hired a dedicated person or promoted someone internally, my recommendation would be to put targets for testing velocity and not for conversion rate improvement. And the reason for this is there is a very direct correlation between how many experiments you're running and what improvement in business metrics or conversion metrics are you seeing. In my experience, to say that you to put a target of conversion rate improvement, say if your conversion rate is 5%, you want to move it to 7%, you really have very little control over that. What you have control over is what activities you can do to hope that your conversion rate increases. So put this target on the leading metric, which is testing velocity, and this lagging metric, which is conversion rate improvement, will take care of it automatically. And also by pushing people or your team to do more testing, you're developing their mindset in coming up with a variety of ideas, prioritizing them clearly, and so on, rather than just waiting for months and quarters for one perfect test that may or may not work. So that's also I've seen, like it's a sort of like a rookie mistake where testing is just seen as an alternative for how things were done previously, wherein if there was a page that needed to be revamped, product manager will take designer inputs, talk to customer, all that is important. But if coming up with one variation is taking you months, then perhaps you're not doing A/B tests correctly. Your testing roadmap needs to be full of many small tests with occasional few really big tests. But you cannot compromise on your velocity just because you want to run a home run, hit a home run.
Yes, that also aligns with our conversations, because our customers have reported that if they've increased their testing velocity, there's also this additional compounded effect of learnings that comes in. So the more experiments they run, the more is their exponential increase in learnings, and hence a greater probability of them coming up with a winning idea. Say after 50 such ideas, the 51st would be there's a greater chance of it converting better or being a winner. And it takes on to its own shape after a certain number of experiments has been done. So maybe testing velocity is a bigger indicator and a leading indicator, as you said.
Yeah, that's a great point, because testing velocity is directly correlated with the rate of learning, and you cannot really predict how much you will learn after 10 tests, but you can certainly say with confidence that you learn more after 10 tests than what you learn after one test. And once you have put a testing velocity and put a calendar, put them on a calendar to create rhythm. So every week, just like there is in the development engineering world, there is this idea of sprints and scrum, where every 2 weeks the development team is delivering something, and it's like a 2 weekly or a weekly rhythm. The same thing your testing team needs to start following, where without fail, every week or 2 week they're launching something new and learning something that's already going. You can use any framework you want, frankly. I've seen a lot of people get stuck up on the right framework. More important than the right framework is having a framework, because that will force you to start picking few ideas every week out of, say, thousands or hundreds of ideas you may have. So you can pick any framework you want. There's lots of frameworks available online for conversion optimization, and VW itself has an inbuilt framework that's embedded in the product, and you can use it out of the box. But the important thing is to have a framework, and not really get stuck up on the right framework. So that was stage two. Hopefully by then you would have started to transition towards process-driven conversion optimization. And now your goal would be to evolve from your own department of conversion optimization and testing, and spread this, whatever culture you've developed in your small team, to the rest of the organization. And let me be very clear that perhaps moving and evolving from this stage is the toughest, because it does require a buy-in from all all sort of facets of your organization, right from the very top, say the CEO, to even departments which have nothing to do with experimentation prima facie. If you have to embrace this culture and spread it across your entire organization, it is a tough battle, but it is doable. And hopefully, the next few sort of tips and lessons may help you do that. And frankly, the reason you'd want to do is because, not just out of your good heart or goodwill, and of course not to underestimate that it's important, but you should know that if other functions start embracing culture of experimentation, your job will become very easy, because then you'll have less hurdles to cross internally, and your team will be celebrated more in the entire company. So even for your professional career and otherwise, I think at least embracing this as a goal, that you need other people to start thinking like experimenters too, is a good goal to have. So the first thing you need to do once you've committed yourself to spreading this beyond your testing and conversion optimization team is to start involving top management through a formal monthly idea gathering and testing update session. I think this is important because you need to acknowledge that um, within your niche of testing and experimentation, you may have a limited context on what's important to business, even though you may have a lot of context of what's important to the marketing team and the goals that are set for you by your bosses or their bosses. But if you go to the very top, say the C-level executives and VPs of different departments, I think you will get a much richer context of what's important to the business. and perhaps then you will start incorporating that richer context in your testing ideas or variations or prioritization. And when you feedback after incorporating that rich context, when you feedback say results on those ideas, you are getting you are likely to get a lot more approval in rest of the organization, as compared to if you just go back and say, hey, I changed a button and it increased click throughs. So you have to start embracing and incorporating the top level, higher level agenda if you want to start, if you want them to start thinking the importance of what you're doing. And beyond that, obviously, every month as a regular cadence, this gives exposure to what you're doing. And over a period of time, even if initially this seems like a formality and a forced thing, uh, I have seen that at different levels, people start opening up, because A/B testing is fundamentally about ideas, and everybody likes to contribute ideas. And once they start doing it, and once they start getting feedback on their own ideas, that's when you have opened up them to start thinking about experimentation in even other decisions that they're taking.
Yeah, because this also corresponds with a conversation I had with an e-tailer in Australia who uses us very frequently, is a power user. And they said the moment they started getting executives to contribute to that discussion, their experimentation velocity went over the roof. So their velocity from 15 experiments of one shot to 30 experiments, just because they had these three powerful folks who knew the business inside out contributing to those discussions. So that's another second order benefit coming out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, if your department has been stuck because of budget constraints, you're not able to hire a developer or not able to outsource more to an agency. If you start involving top management and they see the value, the ask for a higher budget will be much easier, because they see and they hear the results, firsthand. So that is a very good second order benefit. Yes, I agree. And also at this stage, remembering the previous stage, you just had one dedicated testing person, and perhaps either you were relying on the design team or your developers, or you've outsourced. At this stage, I've seen most of the customers and clients of ours, VW, when they realize the importance of it and become serious, they actually commit to building an entire CRO team in-house. And by CRO team, I mean including roles from user research. These are the people who use different analytics tools, surveys, and even do phone interviews with their customers to really build personas and so on. And business analysts who are spending a lot of time digging into data, funnels, cohorts, designers and developers, and I missed but QA people also, because then you are not relying on different functions and asking for favors and so on. If you have this small team of 7 8 people, you will see the testing velocity go much higher, and of course you will see the corresponding results and learnings much higher than previously. This does require investment, but without this investment, you will see small hurdles where someone is not responding for 2 days, or the design team got a different priority from product and so on. All these hurdles will slow you down so much that you'll not be able to get to the experimentation culture that you really want. And again, once you start reaching out to top management and you have the extra capacity in the CRO team to go really fast, at that stage you need to invest in developing systems that let anybody in the organization contribute ideas, hypotheses, and access results and learnings. So at that, and by this I really mean you have to start removing barriers for people outside the CRO team to interact with CRO process. So rather than relying on someone to give you an idea through email, or you sharing results through newsletters, you need to automate this as much as possible, so that as your CRO process runs and CRO process you prioritize, you're sort of transparent to where ideas are coming from and who in the organization is accessing results. So you need to become that machine which gets inputs from anywhere in the organization, and outputs of your machine can be accessed by anyone else in the organization. And that would require investment into developing such systems. And of course, nothing beats creating fun rituals. The Even in the stage one, I recommended to create a ritual to gather ideas, and you should double down on such rituals, because in my experience, organization culture changes when there is a concrete ritual associated with it, which is could be part symbolic, but it could be also playing a role of actually doing function, positive function in the CRO process. So some ideas, I mean, these are just a few ideas you can think. I'm sure you can think of 10 more ideas, but in my experience, I have seen things like people constituting Friday of a month and calling it something like Experiments Friday, so that when that day of a month gets a name, at least it reinforces that organization is thinking about moving to experimentation culture. Similarly, if you've invested in developing a system for gathering ideas, you can create an award, like a quarterly or an annual award, for a person outside the CRO team who contributed most test ideas, that you're recognizing that you really care about participation from across the organization and not just CRO. And similarly, you can create an award for like recognizing a person who did an experiment in a function where no experimentation was being done before. And this, for example, if you have a recruitment team and they are doing experiments on optimizing for candidate experience, and say testing whether people the hiring rate is better when you offer them a chocolate versus if you offer them maybe a bag of chips or a cold drink. You can see that even though this is a very unusual experiment, but this is happening in a context where no experimentation was being done before. Or maybe in your administration team starts A/B testing, say different lunch meals that your employees are being provided with, and ratings being collected. There's so many things that can be done outside of CRO in an experimentation fashion, and you need to start recognizing them.
I just remember this conversation I was having with a client of ours who's a garage aggregator in UK. All right. And what these guys did was they took CRO to a different level altogether. It's an extension of your point number two, where one fine day they just ran out of ideas and they invited around 50 odd garage owners who were listed on their website to come to their office and just contribute ideas for experiments for this entire one day. And these guys came out at the end with a set of 30 ideas, out of which still date the biggest experiment that one came from one of those 30. And just reflects on the point that you mentioned. I mean, it doesn't have to be just the company, it can be anybody even outside from the organization who can come in. And because that's a view which is unbiased, unfiltered, and hence the best view.
Yeah, I mean, that's an amazing story, and I absolutely meant not just in an organization, but if you have customers, invite them, and then some of the great ideas do come from customers. Yeah, and I remember on the third point, when VW was starting out and we were building a sales team, as an engineer who coded VW, I was very skeptical of sales function, frankly, in third year. So I was of the opinion of, why do you need salespeople to give demos and so on. So I remember what we did was to take all the free trials that we were having and only give half of them to the sales team, while letting people interact with the product without sales team for the other half. And we did measure what was the closing rate for a salesperson versus no salesperson for a free trial. I was only convinced for growing the sales team after I saw that it makes a tremendous amount of difference. And yeah, and that's a small little experiments I'm talking about. At VW, we keep on doing them outside of the website and product context. And to build that experimentation, it is important to do these experiments and make a big deal about them. And lastly, I was saying, if you have uh, built a CRO team, you can consider doing even things like putting up posters to share learnings, because people are less reading emails and newsletters. So you can actually go physical in your office to spread the culture of experimentation. And also, I mean, this is an extension of a previous point where investment into systems to contribute ideas and get results. You should also consider creating a dashboard for the entire marketing funnel that shows the number of tests running at any given moment. In an evolved culture, the entire marketing funnel is done justice, because otherwise, if you're not measuring which part of the funnel is running how many experiments, it's usually a few parts of the funnel where overwhelming number of tests are being run. Say top of the funnel, which is like website, but there are other things like middle of the funnel where they're nurturing emails, or even the after the funnel where customer retention things are being done, campaigns. That experimentation starts getting weakened as you go below the funnel. So unless you're really creating a graphic that shows whether your testing efforts are balanced or not balanced, you may not be able to fully do justice to the entire marketing funnel and what it deserves. And then start celebrating inconclusive tests to prevent shaming of people uh, and who happen to have ideas that didn't work, right? And this is really really important, because if there is even a single instance of people start shaming other people because of losing tests, you will see that increase over a period of time. People will stop giving them ideas and start filtering them in their head, which is really important to prevent, because nobody knows initially. I mean, if you knew which idea was good, there was no point of experimentation and testing. So you need to put good tests with inconclusive tests at the same pedestal. You cannot say that testing and experimentation was a failure because for 1 month you had no winning result. It is a really good result that you were able to do 5 tests and all 5 of them gave no winning variation, versus you created only one test and that gave maybe a winner or no winner. So again, this goes back to testing velocity. You need to focus and celebrate testing velocity rather than winners and losers. And last stage is which is where you have done this continuous experimentation across all business functions. There's still, I mean, by this stage, if you've been able to grow your organization culture in few quarters or years, it's a great result that you've been able to derive. And I think it would have been a great sort of learning experience as well. But there's still scope for more things you can do, and I'll just in no particular order talk about, if you are at the very cutting edge, what all can you do to still improve your testing and experimentation culture. This is beyond stage. So beyond stage 4 have and all of these will seem radical ideas, and some of you may even laugh. But this, in my experience, is again, beyond the cutting edge, just for the understanding, which I have seen in my interactions for the people who are really thinking, say, years and decades ahead. And this is have the cross-functional experimentation function report directly to the CEO. So CEO can take the reporting of sales function, marketing function, HR function, and so on. Why shouldn't the CEO also take the experimentation culture reporting? If you're able to elevate this function to such a high level, obviously you will see so much of better results. And this should perhaps be like a moonshot that you're aiming for when you see where do you need to take experimentation culture in your organization. And similarly, once you have this experimentation being reported to the CEO, at that stage, experimentation is at the equal pedestal and not like a sub function or anything else. So you are a peer of sales team, support team, marketing team, product team, and at that stage, you should try to develop a common view and pain points of customers by sourcing data from all functions. So your testing idea should not just come from, say, your analytics. Why can't you tap into your support desk software to see what your customers are complaining for? Why can't you tap into your sales conversations and see uh, what are the winning propositions that are being used by salespeople? And so you need to then expand the horizon of CRO in terms of getting data from just the website or product to any function where customer interaction happens.
Does this mean, Paras, that the ownership of CRO is changing? I've had as I said, the privilege of speaking to so many customers across the globe, and there's this common recurring theme that is very visible to me and the organization here. There was a time when marketeers used to own that number. All right,
Yeah.
and let's talk about 4 years back, where there were fewer channels, and marketing could have controlled all channels in terms of acquisition, and yet control CRO as a function. Today, the number of channels have exploded. You have e-commerce companies have to dominate YouTube, they have to dominate Snapchat, they have to dominate Instagram, they have to dominate Facebook. I mean, of course, you have your usual suspects like SEO and paid and whatnot, and thus the focus gets lost. All right, which is where companies have now realized that you need usability experts to come in. You need web analytics folks to own that number. The purchase confidence metric is not a shared. I mean, it's becoming from a shared number. It is reaching a stage where there are specialists who are kind of focusing on that. All right. So is culture then pervasive? Does it have to be one team's mantle? If not, you've spoken about it briefly, of course, in those slides, but what do you think a structure should look like in years to come, a conversion structure, so to speak?
So I think it's a function of where customers are choosing to interact with the company. Today, like you said, it's no longer limited to just say website or marketing or ads. Customers are interacting on social media, they're interacting on YouTube, and they're interacting on phone. I mean, there's so many customer touch points that you could. I mean, you both have an opportunity to learn from customers in via those touch points, and also influence customer behavior via those touch points. So the conversion optimization, which is frankly just customer experience, making customer experience better, has to be pervasive to all those channels as well. And if it is, I mean, even though there is a growing and positive trend of CRO teams being independent, but even those independent teams are still reporting either to the product function or to the marketing function. I mean, that's been my experience. What I'm suggesting is elevating that and having that being reported to the CEO directly, so that the team has a big, wide mandate to tap into any function in the organization and learn and influence that function directly rather than through either product or marketing. I think the thumb rule should be, if you are facing hurdles in optimizing a particular customer touch point, you need to have at least either ownership or a peer responsibility to that touch point. It can't be sort of your tertiary responsibility. Otherwise, it will not happen, and you'll only end up optimizing just few channels rather than all channels. And then you need to start developing personas around customer needs, and the reason you do that is to really aim towards going from experimentation to personalization around those personas. And the reason I mentioned this here is because I've seen that many organizations start personalizing, or at least they buy into the story of personalization too soon. Maybe there's a vendor who pitches a very sophisticated software or tool around personalizing, and they buy into it. And I've seen so many sort of failures in personalization, not because the tool wasn't sufficient or there was lack of ideas, but because the mindset was not there. Personalizing requires such an evolved mindset and such readiness of resources that, in my experience, it should only happen once a company has a very good experimentation culture and a very deep understanding of customers. Um, but if you are there, the next step is definitely to look towards not just doing like very broad based experiments for say all customers or all visitors, the idea should be to take the next step and start maybe running, say, 100 tests for 100 different micro personas. And if not 100, at least start with a few micro personas where you're now developing creatives and variation for those micro personas rather than just generally. So a form should be bigger for customers who have a persona for a lot of commitment, but the same form should be shorter for the one who are in a hurry. And you need to start doing that. That's when you will see an uplift in your business metrics.
Paras, you said you've seen a lot of these initiatives fail, and it's not about the product; it's more about how you've mapped out the persona. Can you provide a more in-depth analysis about that? I mean, can you be a little more specific about the kind of failures that you have seen, so that the listeners can kind of map it in their own environment and figure out where they are currently?
Sure. So personalization generally, in my experience, I've seen because it's usually started out as tool oriented. People start sort of developing their personalization campaigns around those tools. By that, what I mean, I'll just take an example. For example, if your tool allows personalizing around geography, you show different content to people from a particular city or a country. That's when you will perhaps start trying out different ideas. What if I localize the language according to the country, or what if I do maybe show local time or so on. I mean, it could be any particular variation or creative around that particular personalization option. But maybe what your customers really require is personalization around their needs and not really geography. Maybe someone from Netherlands has exactly the same need as someone from France, and you're just treating them differently on the assumption that because your testing personalization tool gives you geography option that you will show different things. So you need to, I think the personalization effort needs to start with an introspection internally, wherein you are deeply understanding customers, and personalization really works if customers with different needs are treated differently. Uh, Different customers can be completely different. Someone could be using Linux, Mac, they could be using mobile, and they can have like thousands of attributes different, but if their need is the same, their motivation is the same, they most likely the same sort of experiences will relate to them. And you need to then personalize on those rather than on personalization tools. And because generally personalization starts with personalization tools, I find that people end up concluding that it's not having the impact that they were expecting because it's just personalizing on the wrong things.
Absolutely. So the other day I was having a chat with a SaaS founder here in Gurgaon, and he was talking about how they've personalized their website for geographies, as you just mentioned. So they had specific case studies for APAC customers versus US customers. Now the flip side to it was, and that's what he discovered through a survey that he did, was that APAC customers actually did not want APAC case studies. They wanted USA case studies because they were aspirational. They wanted to understand what the West is doing in terms of their own needs that they want to fulfill to that software. And it just backfired, and backfired how? So these are certain things that we all take for granted whilst not identifying the subliminal needs of our audiences. And I think the groundwork should be laid in trying to understand your personas more than anything else. Everything is shallow.
And personas also not in, I mean, usually personas are approached in terms of customer attributes, that X customer earns Y amount of money, lives here, does this and that. But personas should be developed around their needs and in particular context to your product. Someone could be like a male or a female or earning X amount of money or Y amount of money. But if their need is something specific and those needs align, then you need to treat them in the same bucket. And I think perhaps either this is the last one or the second last one. Again, this is the holy grail, and I've not seen many. In fact, I've only seen very, very few companies get to this stage where they have this sophisticated approach that they not just then optimize immediate conversions, they actually look across the entire funnel and optimize for the lifetime value of the customer, and not just across funnel but even beyond the funnel in terms of repeat purchases and all that. Thinking from first principles, the goal of experimentation should definitely be to optimize the lifetime value of customers, which means that if you're looking in isolation, maybe an A/B test where one A/B test has uh, a drop off, a higher drop off, you might end up concluding that that particular variation is hurting you. But if after the drop off, whatever limited number of customers get into your system, they pay you a lot more as compared to the other variation, then you have a net benefit, right? So the only metric that if you could keep an eye on is what are different experimentations doing to your lifetime value of the customers, and not just in isolation their respective conversion rates. And I do remember a case study on our own website where once we had uh, we had changed our homepage with just a simple form. So the entire homepage was literally a form with email address, name, and a sign up button for free trial. And we did see that it increased our conversion rate significantly. We had more number of free trials coming in. But when we analyzed the data in a lot more detail, we realized that people were just signing up because we had a form in their face, and not actually converting and purchasing VW subscription later on. And overall, we were actually losing out by removing friction. Because if we had introduced friction where people had to first read and get familiarized with the product, whichever people did get in, they were of high interest as compared to electricity. So this is important that you need to start aligning all your experiments around this lifetime value rather than immediate conversions. And also, like I said, expand the horizon of who customers are. And I call them non-customer, but for different functions, they're also customers. Start optimizing experiences for your vendors, employees, and potential hires. I do see at least like companies like Google, they embrace this experimentation culture in making over a period of time continuously experience great for their employees, potential hires, vendor, basically anyone, uh, and not just customers that a company interacts with. And I think that's it. Good luck in developing a culture of experimentation in an organization. As I said, my name is Paras Chopra, and I'm very active on Twitter. If you want to follow me, this is my handle. And feel free to sort of ask me questions on Twitter, which are specific to your context and organization. And I'll make sure I reply all of those questions individually.
Thank you, Paras. I had a ball. I'm sure you also would have had fun having this conversation with me. Learned a lot. I'm sure all our listeners are going to benefit a lot out of this conversation.
Thank you.
Before you log off, there's a question that we have. What are the books you are reading right now? What are some books you are reading right now?
Oh, I'm actually reading a couple of books. One book is one I'm reading Upanishad. So Upanishad is the oldest and the most central of texts in Hindu philosophy, and they talk about what is knowledge, what is consciousness, and so on. So I'm spending a lot of time getting familiar with Hindu philosophy because I feel I've missed that out while growing up. And the second book that I'm planning to read, which is out, it's called Intimacies of Four Continents. And it's a book on how the current values of the Western civilization, which is liberalization, freedom, and so on, all the Western liberal values, they've built upon a past which is, not so liberal, which is around colonialism, imperialism, and slavery. So the author tries to show the conflict between the values of Western civilization today and how those values were derived, which is, for example, free trade was derived based on the ability of people to do that in context of slavery. So it's a very interesting book that I'm looking forward to. And the third one I'm reading, I think it's on it's on a 19th century explorer called Humboldt. I hope I've gotten the name right. And this is a guy who Charles Darwin was inspired by, and Charles Darwin actually went to his voyage and wrote The Origin of Species, inspired by this guy who traveled all around the world and really gave us the current modern idea of nature and our relationship with nature and how important is nature. Before that, nature was seen as a tool for humans, which to a large extent, even today, that's the case. But whatever we know about our ecosystems, biodiversity, and nature, we know it because of this guy.
Can we expect a book summary then shortly?
Yeah, I do that all the time on my Twitter.
All right, all right. Have fun, Paras. It was great speaking with you. I wish we can do this more often. Bye. Take care.
Same here, Bhavya. Thank you. Bye bye.